Cool. I mean, I have it recorded as well in the worst case scenario, so I can
We're,
always send it
we're
to you.
both recording it now.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Cool.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. White. Thank you for joining me on the 13th episode here of One to Come Up, a podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs where they can learn from the best of the best. Those on Forbes 30 under 30. We go over your entire career from college to the present day, and then we kind of end up looking forward towards the future. So thank you for joining me today, Mr. White.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you and beyond.
Yeah. So, Mr. White, before we get started, can you tell the viewers a little bit about your company, Dr. Will's? What do you guys sell? Where you guys are located, and what your mission is?
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to call me Liam as well. Yeah, so started the business about 7 years ago now. Company's located in the UK, and we're a food and drink business. We sell condiments. So we make all kinds of condiments, table sauces, so ketchup, barbecue sauce, hot sauce, mayonnaise, also salad dressings in the UK primarily. We were back when we started the business, there were no healthier options on the market. So we were looking actually over to the US where there's a bit more innovation. And we were seeing that, well, in the UK, it was very stagnant. Like people were still having the same ketchup, mayonnaise, mustard that they'd had for years. But the category has quite a big sugar problem. Lots of the products are 25, 30, even 40% sugar, and made with lots of ingredients that you don't sort of recognize, pronounce. So we saw this. At the same time, we were seeing there was more innovation in the US and also in the UKB. There were lots of other categories of food were becoming healthier, but condiments hadn't changed. So we started out making them in a event like at the very early days in my business partner's restaurant kitchen. We were making them there, selling them in on market stalls, and then into a few farm shops, and then we've scaled the business into kind of mainstream retail from there. One of the things like we learned early on is health is great, but it's important that your products taste incredible. So we've landed on a range that tastes fantastic. I think they deliver. They deliver against all the mainstream brands, but at the same time, we don't add any sugar. So we use dates instead. We use a lot less of it. So you're kind of a lower sugar and a better sugar source. And then also natural ingredients. So everything that's in the products are things that you'd recognize, can pronounce, and have in your kitchen. And yeah, that's essentially Dr. Wilson.
Awesome. That's really cool. Healthy and tasting good. What a perfect
Exactly.
combination for condiments, certainly. So normally I like to take the podcast back to your college days. That's kind of who this podcast is geared towards. So could you explain your time at University of Bristol? I know you were in a little bit of a different pursuit at that point for your career, a little bit of a different degree. So how was your college experience like?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess before I went to college, I always knew I wanted to do. I like maths. I like kind of analysis, quite technical, that kind of thing. So after studying at school, I guess high school for you guys,
Yeah.
I'm studying there. I decided to do engineering maths was the degree I did because it was essentially a really broad degree. One of the things in the UK is a lot of the degrees are very specific. Like in the US, I know you guys can major in something, but then you can also you get a quite good opportunity to do a few different things, like different subjects, different areas. Whereas in the UK, it can be very specific. And I specifically wanted to do something that was a bit broad, which enabled me to kind of learn as much as I could, and then also have lots of options when I finished. So I did engineering maths. Studied that for 3 years. Got my bachelor's degree there. While I was Before I actually headed to university, I did an internship in investment banking. So I took a year gap year, and I worked at Rothschild, the boutique investment bank in the UK. And that was amazing. I don't think they run the program anymore, but they used to have a program for 18-year-olds, gap year people. And that was fantastic because I have, age 18, I'd learned like how like real work, how the workplace really works in like a pretty like interesting like finance environment. And I really liked it. And I felt very lucky to have that opportunity. So then when I was at university, I did the kind of standard finance internship routes. So after my second year, I did an internship at Credit Suisse, European Investment Bank. And then I graduated and joined JP Morgan Chase. And I did my grad training in New York and then came back to London to start. And I did my first couple of years there before kind of taking the entrepreneurial route.
Cool. So yeah, that's actually kind of the route I want to take. A little bit finance focused, and hopefully that's where I want to work. At one of those investment banks. So that's a perfect segue. Could you explain to us your time there at J.P. Morgan as an investment banker? What's the life of an investment banker at one of those really prestigious firms?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think I really enjoyed my time there in general, I'd say. But you work extremely hard. So I kind of I guess I'm a bit of a sucker for punishment, and I like to kind of push myself to the limit. I kind of did like while I was going through college and still a little bit now, I ran like track and field to a reasonably high level. And I always kind of tend to pick the hard things. And I looked at investment banking, I was like, well, that's it's the most prestigious place to be. And it's going to be the place where I'm going to learn the most in the shortest period of time. So that's why I did it. Um, Training was incredible. So I started out, flew us all into New York. At that time, I was what was I, 21, 22 years old. I think I was 22. And it was amazing. Like, in an apartment in the US, it's staying with all the other kind of international graduates. So there's a mixture of like US, European, and then kind of Asia Pacific, so APAC as well. So you had this amazing class of people who were all kind of gathered from around the world. I mean, we studied and did our training program, but we also had a lot of fun because you flown all these people in. So we had a great time, lots of getting to know each other and going out and all that kind of stuff. And it was honestly so much fun. Like I can't think of a better place to start a career. I then stayed there for just shy of 2 years. It was actually more like a year and a half. And like I said, I learned a ton. Really great place to start. You learn how to work in a really high stress environment, manage tons of different product projects at the same time. I find finance interesting. I was in consumer M&A, so doing consumer and healthcare. So I was kind of like working on all these big companies who were looking at buying up acquisition targets, that kind of thing, understanding how that all works, that world. And it was a great place to start my career. But I realized quite quickly I probably wasn't going to be a career investment banker. You work flat out all the time. I care about health. I like to be able to have time to kind of, look after myself, exercise, that kind of thing. And I also wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I didn't see myself as the kind of person who would be working in a bank when I was kind of, 50 as a managing director. I wanted to have a go at entrepreneurship and see if I could kind of make my mark that way.
Yeah, that's certainly always important to consider. Is this the right career for you? So yeah, what kind of prompted then your transition to food, to the food industry? What kind of inspired you, and how'd you transition from finance to the food sector? What were like kind of the initial stages there?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to move out of finance and do something more entrepreneurial. So I started off just applying to everything that was related to a startup. So I applied to companies as big as like Uber, which is not anywhere near as big as it was now. This is back in 2017. So it was a big startup, but it was very much like a messy, kind of rapidly scaling, loss-making company then. I applied to companies as big as that through to tiny little startups I started applying to. And then I also started networking and meeting people, just trying to find the people who worked in startups in London, basically. Through that, I actually ended up applying for a job and then meeting Will, who became my business partner. We got talking and kind of realized quite quickly that at that time it was just Will and Josh, so two business partners. I became the third. Um, they had this idea, so they had this idea for kind of the healthier condiments. Had made a couple of things in the kitchen, but we didn't have any more than that. I met them and they realized quite quickly that they actually needed a business partner to help on the kind of the business operations side. So I joined them in that process as a co-founder, then became kind of CEO and run the business now further down the line. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started out. Also, my mum is a food writer, so I kind of grew up surrounded by food. My mum was always working with chefs, writing, helping them write their books. She had a column in the newspaper, the Times newspaper over here in the UK. So I kind of grew up in that world.
Wow, that's really a perfect coincidence here that you three came together. You had the business background, you had the food background. You were really perfectly suited for that job. So
Yeah, luck.
yeah, very good luck. So that was around 2017. So yeah, what are like the processes of starting a food company? How do you go from making that batch in the kitchen to then initially I would assume you go to the local delis and the local retailers and everything.
Yeah, exactly that. So you kind of scale up gently. So you start off, yeah, making a product yourself, often selling it on a, getting some feedback is probably the first and most important thing. So initially it's friends and family, then you start, we're doing market stalls to people. We started in Newcastle, which is in the north of England. So we go and do the local market, farmers market kind of thing at the weekend, sell our product, get people to taste it there and then, see what they thought, write the feedback down, like very, very like grassroots stuff. And then from there we could start kind of perfecting the products, iterating. And then I say the key steps are figuring out what you're going to do for manufacturing. So you can either make it yourself and you've got to, you know, get a facility sorted out, find a unit, start buying equipment, or you can find a manufacturer. We took the kind of the second route to find a manufacturer, mainly because we didn't know anything about, production at that time. And also it just enables you to scale a bit faster because you can work with somebody who's an expert, makes a product that is it tastes great and also is safe, importantly, because they have fantastic food safety in these factories. So we found a great producer once we had some product together, and then that enabled us to kind of start making product that was ready to sell. And then yeah, it was exactly what you said, finding the kind of local delis, farm shops, definitely playing on the kind of local startup card. We're from this area, we just started, we're doing something a bit differently. There wasn't really anyone making kind of healthier sauces then. And then we just started to, yeah, scale it up from there.
Awesome. So I know in kind of during that time, 2017 to about 2020, we're a little bit of a different Dr. Wills. You had a little bit of different color, a little bit of a different scheme of it all. So what was I guess your modeling and your transitioning and growth and advertisement during that time? To scale up to get into like I know for you there's like Tepsco, that's a big retailer. So how would you pursue it at that time?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a few things, and hopefully there'll be some stuff that maybe people can learn from this. I think so we started out and we were doing a bit of everything. So actually in the early days, the biggest channel for us was food service. So we were selling into cafes, restaurants, and then also into offices, catered offices where people were on site and having lunch there every day, university canteens because university students were becoming healthier and they kind of the universities were realizing actually they should have a better food offering because that's what the students want. They don't want kind of like you know chicken nuggets and French fries anymore. They want something a bit more a bit healthier. So we started out selling food service, we're selling to delis, and to be honest, we were doing too much. We started exporting a little bit in the early days, like when we got opportunities. But we weren't able to, I think we definitely made some mistakes in those early days, and particularly with the export stuff, you don't have the resources to make it work. You just ship a pallet of sauces out to France or Holland or something, and no one knows your brand over there. You're not kind of setting up promotional like campaigns and all the kind of stuff that you need to do, and we know we need to do now. So we were a little bit kind of like, let's test a bunch of things, see what works. Food service kind of stuck and was moving. We always knew we wanted to be a retail brand. But it was taking us some time to get into the bigger guys. We got into Ocado, which is the kind of the biggest online retailer in the early days, and that's still a customer now. We got in there in 2018, so they've been brilliant for us. So we launched in there, and then while we were kind of working on getting into the big retailers, we sold online a little bit, and then we were doing food service. And then we've definitely, perfected things as we've gone. So retail, 2020, we had COVID. And that was a huge challenge for us because basically every food service outlet that we sold to just shut overnight. And suddenly we were the only kind of outlets we had left were Ocado online. That actually went pretty well because people were buying everything online because they had a bit better availability than in the stores. Amazon, our own website, and then some of those independent delis and places that we sold to. So, but then we got a kind of, COVID was really tough for us initially because we lost so much business. But then we actually ended up coming out of it stronger because we ended up getting a listing at Waitrose, which is kind of the biggest sort of premium retailer in the UK, probably a bit like kind of Sprouts or Whole Foods, I guess, in the US. And then into Tesco, which is the biggest kind of mass retailer, the biggest market share. So we ended up getting into two of the big retailers at the end of 2020, and then that was probably the springboard that kicked us on. And as you said, we've made changes as we've gone through. So we've always tried to tweak, and that's something that we've done on everything. So whether it's product, the product is, I'd say 10x, but it's probably 100 times better than it was in those early days. We've made so many changes. We've got better at making it, better recipes, and then also the branding. We've got the branding, I think, a lot cleaner. And yeah, we always wanted to have a fun and interesting brand, but I think we've got the right balance now of something that really kind of stands out on shelf. also brings kind of the personality we want to. So everything has improved and changed over the years.
Awesome. So that's kind of cool that you guys came out of that stronger. You've perfected your brand now, and you're the Dr. Rose that we know today. So I know during 2020 during that pandemic time, you had a little bit of like a fundraising adventure where you had some fundraising, a campaign started, then you lost it, then you had an investor ghost you, and then you did crowdfunding. So could you explain that time that adventure for us?
Yeah, definitely. Done your research. I'm impressed. So yeah, we had a round that was underway. Then we lost tons of our business, and basically a combination of losing the business during COVID and also investors suddenly basically shutting down because suddenly a lot of these guys had their money in the public markets, probably had 30 or 40% wiped off their net worth in a couple of weeks. And surprise, surprise, a lot of these guys are like, I'm not going to invest right now. Let's put pause on everything. And I think probably the last thing you're investing in a period that's as chaotic as those kind of March 2020 COVID days are startups, because who are the least likely to make it through? Probably the early stage businesses that are pretty shaky, don't have tons of money in the bank, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the investor market was basically non-existent. So we kind of adapted. We cut any cost that we could really to survive, and just kind of went into like a semi sort of hibernation mode, where we just kind of ticked over basically, at the same time like refined our pitch to those retailers so that we were kind of ready to push through when we could. Then yeah, we then sort of got fundraising going again, had an investor who was out in Asia, we had so many calls, emails, everything, all the documents, the IM, the whole thing, and was ready to invest a pretty sizable chunk of money. And then we just essentially got ghosted at the end of it.
Oh,
And it was honestly, such a strange experience because you kind of all logic says, we're having calls on a Sunday evening and all this sort of stuff. And all logic says, like, why are you wasting your time on this sort of thing, going back and forth? We had an advisor who was a broker who was in the middle, and we were speaking direct to the investor as well, but there was definitely misinformation. So we had like an advisor, a broker, and the investor, and like definitely the learning there is, work with definitely work with you trust for sure, but also like have a line of communication direct with the investors, and we always did. And there was just too many people in between, and the broker in particular, I don't think was giving us the whole picture, and it was a real mess. But anyway, we came through that. We then decided to do a crowd fund because we needed to raise money relatively quickly, but we also thought consumer product, great opportunity for us to, to
yeah.
raise money from the crowd and build a base of followers who want to, push our brand. So we did that, and it went really well. Raised about £1 million back in 2021, and that really got us going, and it's pretty much taken us. We've done a couple of smaller rounds since, but it's pretty much taken us to kind of where we are now.
Awesome. So how did yeah, I guess how did that elevate your company? Because from there that really was the transition from like a small startup to now like one that, is kind of comparable to Heinz almost. So how did well that's the goal. So how did you transition afterwards from that, and how did that act as a springboard now?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we've got a long way to go to get to
Oh,
those kind of levels, but hopefully we're in the right direction. But yeah, that was, I'd say, pre 2020 was definitely scrappy startup phase, and then yeah, we really stepped things up like when we launched into retail. So I think when you're getting into retail, everyone you think the hardest thing is getting into retail, but actually the hardest thing is like working in retail, selling, staying there. So that was what we learned pretty quickly. It was like, okay, we're here now, but it's going to be 10 times harder for us to make this work. You're competing against brands that have 100, a million times perhaps your advertising spend, right? You can be like, our big competitors are Kraft, Heinz, and Unilever. They're some of the biggest businesses in the world, and they're spending tons and tons of money every single year on promotional spend. They have most of the shelf. So if you look in, condiments are pretty similar in the US than it is in the UK. Like it's dominated by those brands, and the smaller brands have one or two facings within this kind of sea of Heinz, Hellman's products, that kind of thing. So big challenges there, but we very quickly learned how to operate on a like kind of a shoestring budget. And we find and yeah, we've scaled nicely through retail. We've definitely had our challenges. As I said, we've kind of tweaked products, tweaked formats, tweaked the brands to make it really stand out. And we're in a place now that we have some really fantastic products that work well in retail. And it's very much a case of scaling that up and doing it on a wider scale, getting into more retailers, more products in those retailers, and then at some stage looking at more geographies.
Awesome. So I guess that's something you never really think about, all the startups that are on the shelves there. So kind of like and you kind of always wonder how did with those one or two facing items there on the shelves, how do those companies survive? So I guess could you explain to us I don't want to get into the weeds here, but like a little bit of behind the scenes kind of like the business model of a small company, getting on the shelves and then surviving off of that. Like do you even make, profit, or is it just advertising?
Yeah, so we actually do. I ended up doing a bunch of like TikTok stuff, and I do quite a lot of like going into store, and people find it really interesting, like going into store, and I talk about like what I see, so what's on the shelf, what stands out, how our product's looking, and then what the kind of the pros and cons are, and what we need to do, like what happens when a product's out of stock, and people love it because people don't really know how a supermarket works. You know how it works from the point of view of where things are to buy, but you don't know kind of the business side. But in terms of how it works, challenge you have with a retail business, different to a direct to consumer business, is sales are very lumpy. So you're very much like in the early days, we were waiting for to get into one of these retailers, and then the volumes are great when you get in, but it's like you've got to get in, right? So then you get this kind of big spike in demand, and then you have your sales grow, and then you eventually get to another retailer and you get another kind of step forward. But it's the hard part is kind of surviving and waiting till you get those big increases, right? So in those early days, we were like very much kind of doing everything we could, but we didn't. We were waiting to get into those retailers, and then when you're in, it's a case of you got to make the most of what you've got, right? So you've got to really stand out, drive trial. So in the early days, we know that everybody who's in retail in those early days had probably never heard of us. So what can we do to stand out more than others? And like that is branding. So making sure that your brand is as bold, is clear, so consumers pick it up and they can see straight away on our products, like all natural ingredients, great taste awards. They flip it over and they can see the stuff about the sugar, so they have like all the reasons why they should buy it. You can see it's made in the UK, keto friendly, like all of these things. So it's kind of make the most of every asset you have. And the one thing in retail is your brand is going to be there. Social media was key. Like that's it's free. So TikTok in particular these days, we have videos that get 100,000, even a million like views sometimes, and we don't pay anything for that, right? You can pay a lot more for media that's a lot worse than that. So there's a ton of things you can do there, but it's very much in those early days, it's kind of like make it work, and then as you start selling, the retailer will then launch another product, put you into more stores. So Tesco, for example, have about 3,000 stores in the UK, but you'll start off in a couple of hundred, and then it's like you move into more as you perform. So you just got to make it work, and then you can build bit by bit more retailers, different channels. So you can look at kind of whether you do export your products, whether you do something like food service or travel, online as well. So there's lots of different areas, but it's like getting that right balance between a bit of diversification, so you can grow your business, but also doing, picking like maybe it's 2, 3 areas and doing it really, really well, because that builds a lot more powerful business than selling like a little bit in a few areas and not really like getting any traction anywhere.
Cool. So I guess that answers those questions of the behind the scenes or behind the shelves, I should say. So like where are you guys now? What are your focuses on now? Where was 2024 for you? You're in retail now, but you mentioned diversification, so I'm sure you must have other routes and ways to of diffusion.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're trying to more than double the business this year. So a lot of that is we're in a good place in retail in terms of like we have some, as I said, some really good products that are doing a good job for us. So it's now doubling down on that. So a case of getting our products into some more retailers. So working really hard on that. And then within the retailers we're in, working to get more distribution, more stores, and also add some more products to the range. So those are kind of the lumpy things we're doing. And then on top of that, it's just building the brand. So the best form of growth you can have is rate of sale. So increasing the speed at which your products come off the shelf, that people buy them off the shelf. So, and that's kind of a function of brand awareness and also how good your products are. So if you have a product that people love, they're addicted to, they just think it's fantastic, then they're going to, buy it once, and they're going to repeat buy it maybe a couple of weeks later rather than a couple of months later. So trying to do that as much as we can. So yeah, big focus on just, we're super product focused, trying to make sure that every product that's on the shelf is awesome and people love it every time. So just trying to build that rate of sale and keep increasing our distribution. We're pretty much a UK business. So we focus kind of like 90+% of our sales are here. And that's the focus. There's a lot more we can do in our home market, but we will also look at, at the right time, like look at, other areas of other markets. But we want to build a really make a dent in the UK market and become, a brand that's really known over here.
Awesome. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense though, to have kind of like a strong foundation, and then from there you can spread and diversify across all of Europe. And I would imagine in Europe it's a little bit easier because it's like kind of that free trade to go from the UK to like Germany or to Belgium or.
It was, but now we've had Brexit, so it's actually a little harder because we're not part of Europe anymore. So it was a lot easier until a few years ago. So there is a challenge there that it's not as easy as it was, but at the same time, we're still very close to those countries, and we do have, there are agreements in place that mean that we can trade with them, and also we don't have. I mean, challenge you have in the US. I mean, the great thing is your market's enormous, so you often don't need to export your products at all. But obviously, getting your products over to Europe is such a challenge from like a logistics point of view. Whereas like within Europe, you have all these different markets that you can go after.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't think about the whole Brexit situation there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I forgot about that.
that's another thing we had to navigate in the early days. We had I think we had Brexit, then we had COVID, then we had like the Russia-Ukraine war, and we buy a ton of our ingredients, like a lot of the oil that we use for mayonnaise is bought near Ukraine, in Ukraine, and around Ukraine. So then that was the prices doubled over there. So we had all of these things back to back
Oh,
to back. So lots of challenges, especially in the early days.
yeah, but it's the survival of the fittest, and you came out and you're now like the top brand. Sure, that kind
Getting
of
there.
carved off a lot of your competitors.
Yeah, a lot of it is, and you do have that in a startup. Like a lot of it is sometimes survival, like you say. It's you have periods where the market's good and you're pushing on. You have periods where it is a bit of a survival game. But you make it through and you're stronger for it.
Certainly. All right, so it's we're kind of going from the past now to the present. What 2024 was for you, and you mentioned in 2025 you have plans to more than double your sales. So how do you
Yeah.
that, and I guess what are the major challenges associated with that?
Yeah, definitely. Major challenge, I'd say, that there's a few. So there's definitely production. So we're lucky to be working with a manufacturer that's really well placed to scale. So we know that they can, it's very important to have a partner that you're on the same page with. So they know that you're like what you're trying to do, and they're ready to sort of grow with you. Because the last thing you want is to have orders coming in from customers, launches, and not be able to meet them. So that's a big thing, making sure the supply chain's ready and the whole business is talking to each other and is equipped. Because when you're trying to, double or more a business, things move very quickly and you're having to manage everything. So from a sales point of view, through to the operations and having the stock, and then also like finance, making sure that you have the finance in place to fuel that growth. So it's a complete business effort. But yeah, definitely making sure we scale production really well, making sure we on the sales side, like winning the business with the retailers, and then from a product point of view, just developing great product. I think something that we're seeing now is in the early days, we were probably a bit ahead of the health trends. So I think back 2017, 2018, 2019, people for sure are interested in health, but there were, it's very different to how it is now. You look now, and I'd say almost everybody cares about their health, and it's not just kind of fitness enthusiasts, like a normal, a standard person who is, not an athlete, not a fitness enthusiast, is walking down the aisle and is scanning barcodes, reading the back of the pack, trying to cut down on processed foods. That's the biggest kind of market trend at the moment. Is this kind of ultra processed food thing. So people are trying to eat whole foods and not have product that's been sort of processed too much, and that works really well for us because we're natural ingredients, minimally processed, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think the market is in a much better place for us than it was. We were probably a little early, and that's often like a situation that startups have where they come in a bit early, and then the market actually catches up, and we're definitely seeing that now, and that's fueling some of the growth in some of our products.
Well, I guess that's some of the advantages and disadvantages of being a little bit avant-garde. You're ahead, and then it's got to catch up with you. But that's associated with innovation. Um,
Exactly.
exactly. So all right. So I guess we've kind of gone over the entire career, past, present, a little bit of future. So where do you, and we're kind of at that half hour mark. So and I kind of like to end the episode looking forward towards the future. So I guess maybe 5 years. Have you expanded into the rest of Europe? What's the food line looking like, or
Yeah,
America?
definitely. Yeah, so we'd like to be. I said kind of like my ambition for the business is to have Dr. Will's on every shelf where you'd find Heinz ketchup, Hellman's, or I think it's True Made Foods over here, where you'd find those products. I want Dr. Will's to be available there as a natural, healthier alternative. So that's what we're aiming towards, and that means that in the UK we're in all the retailers, and it's you can walk down the street and you can pick Dr. Will's up. And then we want to do that on a more global scale. So yeah, we won't be in every country in 5 years' time, but we want to be very much you know through Europe and in the key markets. Maybe we're in the US, should be in the US then, and other kind of Middle East. We do a little bit there, Asia, in those key markets as a viable alternative. With a great range of products that that are healthy across every kind of subsection of condiments, as the kind of go-to brand for anybody who wants quality, great tasting condiments that don't compromise on health.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you here eventually sometime in America and to
Definitely.
test out your products.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited to when the time comes to get the product stateside.
Yeah.
And yeah, hope you enjoy them when that time comes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today. This was certainly a pleasure to
Yeah, no,
me.
likewise. Yeah, pleasure to join you. And good luck with everything. I'm very impressed at what you're doing at the age you are. And I'm sure it's going to look great on your applications. And I'm sure you've probably built a better network than many people your age from doing this as well.
Thank you. All right.